Okay, Shalom Aleichem. It's my honor and pleasure to have with us Yungaman Talmud Chacham, a Rav, and an expert in many fields of halacha. And I asked him to come and share with us, being that we learn Yeridea, especially in Yonim Kashrus, and this is one of his fields of expertise, to share with us, as I say many times, the story that a woman came to a Rav with Shaila of Areya, Shaila of Arlev, and the Rav Vustasach, the halacha of if this is Areya, the halacha is so and so. If this is the Lev, the halacha is so and so. But the practical part, the Rav did not know. So Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Menachem and Pikarski knows side the halachic part and side the practical part. So it's my honor and pleasure to ask Rabbi Pikarski to share with us side the halachic, the Torah view, and please bring it down minahar ela so we should see the practical part too.
Thank you very much. In kashrus industry, and an industry it's very big. There's, I believe in the U.S. there's over 1,000 hechshedim. There are you subdivide it into two main areas. There's the food service side, your restaurants, your caterers, your retail establishments. And then there's the commercial side, your manufacturers who produce either the final product that you find on your store shelf, or even the the raw material that might go into another raw material that might end up in your ketchup or your mayonnaise or what have you. I will focus mainly on the commercial side. That's where my area of knowledge is. And to be honest, I've done a little bit of food service, and in my opinion, food service is much more difficult than a commercial operation. Even though technically you're dealing with a smaller operation, but it is much more complex to deal with. Let me give you an example. You have a company that may be producing 100 or 150 or 200 different powders. And they may have 500 ingredients. Obviously, a mashgiach goes in, has to be very well aware of what those ingredients are. He has every kashrus agency gives his list a different name. Call it a Schedule A, call it a whatever you will, and he can, based off that list, he could know. He'll check the raw materials and see what's going on. That sounds very complicated, 500 ingredients, but a typical well-run company does not run out of an ingredient and need to order something the next minute. It doesn't happen. They know well ahead of time how much they're using, when they're going to need to order new, and they're pretty much in control of what they're doing. Whereas if a caterer, even if he has enough oil, and if he happens to run out of oil, and he needs to send somebody down the block to buy some canola oil, well then, depending on what the supermarket down the block has, well, that's the canola oil that they're getting. And the mashgiach now has to figure out on the fly whether that canola oil is acceptable or not. So it's just one simple example of the complexity.
So therefore, the mashgiach tmidi becomes a bigger issue?
The mashgiach tmidi becomes certainly a bigger issue. In food service, absolutely. In companies, much less so. A mashgiach tmidi in a company is essentially, when you're dealing with meat, especially the requirement of halacha, when you are dealing with other things, all sorts of halachas come into play. A question of the chazak of umen le'mareches kasei. You have the question of mirtas. If they don't know how often you're walking in or when you're walking in, so there's a question of mirtas. And there are several factors together. To be brutally honest, when a kashrus agency sets up a
pikarski, are you saying that mirtas means afraid? You have to explain.
Okay.
Mirtas, you're saying, will not apply for a caterer?
Well, the halachic mirtas technically applies to a caterer, but there actually, if I know that he's not mirtas, that he's not afraid, well then you have to cover whatever the halachic mirtas would cover. Is the caterer afraid? Yeah, to some extent. Is that enough not to require mashgiach tmidi? Hard to say. You have to judge the caterer. Essentially, you have The issue of a frume yid owning a food service business, do you need a mashgiach or not? To the credit of the National Hechsherim, they require a mashgiach tmidi outside of the owner, even though the owner is a frume yid. And even though technically, according to halacha, that's not required, but bitter experience has shown us that it's a good idea. So they require it. And interestingly enough, that's actually a question in Chesed Mishpat also. Am I entitled to require a frume yid to have a mashgiach tmidi when he can function as one, where he's going to have to pay more money? It's a question in Chesed Mishpat. Without getting into the lumdus of Chesed Mishpat, it's not an area that I'm comfortable to paskin in. The answer is that if you want my hechsher, whoever the particular agency is, I'm entitled to ask it of you because you're entitled to go somewhere else. So I'm not coercing you. I'm telling you, you want my hechsher. These are my conditions. I believe that that solves the Chesed Mishpat issue, but really it requires further research and the discussion of somebody who's an expert in Chesed Mishpat. That's not my area. So when a kashrus agency sets up a kashrus protocol for a facility where they're manufacturing whatever it may be, you're taking milk and you're evaporating it and you're making milk powder, zolzain, for example. It is, unless you have a mashgiach tmidi in there, it is impossible to guard against intentional misbehavior. However, intentional misbehavior will out. They will be caught. Sooner or later, they will be caught. And when you're setting up a protocol, essentially you're setting up a protocol where, when you're putting together the chazaka of uman le'mara cheskase, a professional doesn't mess himself up. I'm about to do that. There's a chazaka, there's a presumption, uman, a professional le'mara cheskase, doesn't ruin his reputation. A professional wants to produce a professional thing. And halacha puts weight on that. There's also, they're afraid, they don't know when I'm walking in for my next inspection. When you put that up, when you put together all those factors, you want to put in a system that prevents against mistakes. Where, say, they're running kosher and non-kosher in two separate lines, you want to set up a system that they don't get confused and mix the kosher with the non-kosher. So you can prevent mistakes. If they intentionally decide to do something wrong, I'm not there. Nobody's there 24/7, unless it's hashgacha tmidus issue. But nobody's there 24/7. Theoretically, they can pull it off. I will tell you from experience that they will get caught, because part of doing hashgacha is not only knowing the halacha. Part of it is you have to be a shtickle psychologist, and a shtickle have a mechanical bent and understand machinery. And you talk to people and you ask them all sorts of questions, and innocent questions, not so innocent questions, and you can find out all sorts of things that they inadvertently say that will raise red flags. I've had occasion once to have to remove a hechsher from a company because they claimed it was a mistake, but you don't pull pipe for 100 yards by mistake. You don't add a pipeline for 100 yards by mistake, and we removed our hechsher.
What went wrong because of that?
Actually, the product did not become treif because of it. They mixed in something that wasn't kosher. It was bottle, but I can't give a hechsher on something that's bottle. We do not nullify something that's asur l'katchila initially. In other words, we don't create a product that has shishim is just about under 1.6%. We don't create a product where 1% of it is treif. If it happened, and the 1%, which is by volume, not by weight, and the 1% went into it, then we might be matir it, but to allow them to create such a formula is not allowed. So they went over here and they mixed in something that was not kosher, that was the equivalent of a kosher product, and we yanked the hechsher, because if they would have been by accident, okay, then there was a discussion: is it bottle? Is it not bottle? Do we give them a knas, some type of a fine? There are ways to deal with that. But if they did it intentionally, how do I know he's not going to do it the next week intentionally, even though they claimed it was a mistake? But that's the that creates a. By the way, that creates a situation of mirtas for everybody else, because if they know that I'm willing to pull a hechsher they're afraid because it's a loss of a lot of money. Kashrus is a big, big business, and it's very valuable. It adds a lot of value to a product, especially when you're dealing with raw materials, and they don't want to lose that. And no reputable kashrus agency will take over a hechsher that was dropped because of kashrus violations. I know because I was called about that particular company by another reputable kashrus agency, and they didn't take it. I explained to them the situation, and they said, "Yeah, you did the right thing," and they would not certify it. So that's that's what we do in kashrus. I mean, so you're dealing. Obviously, there's knowing how to kasher equipment.
So could you please summarize when do you think, or when is the policy you need a I don't know if everybody has the same policy. When do you need a hechsher tmidi, and when do you say? Because I know there are some places you come once a year, or are there some places you come once a month? What is the typical policy? Is there a general policy? Let the people know what the going policy is.
Repeat the question.
Okay. The question is, what's the policy on the frequency of visits? And the answer is, there's no such thing as a policy on frequency of visits. You walk into the establishment, you evaluate what's happening there, and then you evaluate based on what's happening how often you need to come in. If you have a company that wants a hechsher on water that they're pumping in from a spring, I mean, doesn't really need a hechsher. Now, if they
So why do they want the hechsher?
they want the hechsher because it adds value. Because the customer, the fact is that once I'm going into such a place, I'm obviously going to make sure that if they're filtering the water, I want to find out how they're filtering it. Practically speaking, there's no real issues with the filter. Some places might pasteurize the water. Now there you have a problem because what else is being run on that pasteurizer? Now, if I see a reputable hechsher on the water, I'm not worried about how it's pasteurized because they're going to take care of it. Either they'll kosher it up, however it is that they will deal with water that's being pasteurized. Although, as far as I know, water typically is not pasteurized. I've heard that there's the odd place where it is pasteurized. I did hear of a situation where water was stored in a tanker for 24 hours. That's a question of kavush, technically pickling. That could aser the water. Theoretically, even though you get into pogum, because it's more than 24 hours from when the treif went into the tanker, so retroactively it would not aser the water. Look at chilu, obviously we don't want to get into such a situation. So that's a fairly simple operation, so you don't really have to go in that often. Where you have an operation where they're running kosher and treif one after the other, then first of all we have to go in and kosher the equipment. So you're in there at least as often as the switchover happens. And then you want to come in some other times, just to make sure, that they're following the schedule that's set up. How do I know that in the middle of the kosher schedule they don't interrupt and run some treif without letting me know? So we have to go in. Obviously you could look at records as well, but you do have to go in on the odd unannounced time to create miritas.
So let me ask you a question, please. Obviously, the hashgacha is, if I may say this, primarily are for people who are iffy, people who need to have we're questioning their trust. If you have a fruma yid who has a line of Weissebord, you hear me? Who has a line of Weissebord, you mentioned before, he might even be more knowledgeable, more trustworthy than the Rav. Would you would you say he still needs a hashgacha?
That is a judgment call, really. Like I said, the policy of the national hashgacha is in general, especially in meat places, is to have a hashgacha, to require hashgacha and such a thing. If there's a fruma yid that owns a company, where is the company located? The fruma yid is living in Borough Park in Crown Heights in Los Angeles. The manufacturing is happening in Hebron, Nebraska. What does that help me that the owner is a fruma yid?
How about a ma pa shop, a small shop?
A ma pa shop. Well, we remember what happened in Muncie several years ago.
Well, that's a meat plant.
That's
Talk
meat.
about somebody makes chocolate chip cookies.
Somebody who makes chocolate chip cookies. How do you? The question is, how often do you have to go in? That's a judgment call. If it was non-Jewish owned, well, and are we making it pas Yisrael or not? Assuming you make it pas Yisrael, So you have to be in there often enough to assure the Pas Yisrael. You want to know what else is being produced there. You're making only chocolate chip cookies, or are you also making, vanilla cookies and some milk, or a cheesecake? The moment you're making cheesecake, you're creating a whole new complication. How do you keep the cookies parv? Is it being run on the same equipment? Is it not being run on the same equipment? These are all issues. You have to judge each situation as it comes up. And the factor.
My question is, why wouldn't a Goldstein, a frumme Yid Goldstein say, I'm as frum as the Rav. I have a line of Eisenbart. I'm making something in my kitchen. I don't need somebody watching me.
Well, technically speaking, he can do that. The question is what the customer wants. Would I buy it? Probably not. Not unless I know him personally and I eat in his house. And even then, the moment somebody's making something for commercial consumption,
it's more of a sale thing. It won't sell.
Part of it is it won't sell, but the moment somebody's making something for commercial consumption, my feeling is, again, this is a personal feeling. I'm not saying anything official. I'm not representing any kashrus by saying this is my personal feeling. When somebody makes something for commercial consumption, in my opinion, they should have a hechsher. Just because of vasisa yasher v'hatov, to do what's just and right, and also mitzad v'hiyisim nikim. You want to have clean hands. If I bring in a kashrus agency, then I could say, I have clean hands. I have somebody who's telling me what I'm supposed to do, and they're responsible. So it creates, it removes doubt. It is essentially what it does. An outsider. I will tell you, I've had situations where problems have come up, mistakes have been made, and now you have a question, So, being familiar with Allah, I know that the product is kosher, but mitzat clean hands, I've called up other kashrus agencies, spoken to their rabbanim, and told them straight out, because I want to have clean hands, I'm calling you. I want your opinion. This is the situation. I think kach v'kach. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is there a policy issue sometimes? Would you allow it through? And we discuss these issues. And I know that I'm not the only one that does such things. Kashrus agencies have poskim that they rely on, who they deal with. The most interesting kashrus scenario that I deal with, actually, and I personally, when I go into facilities, I'm not really going in to do hashgacha. I'm going usually in to set up the facility for our mashgichim to deal with. So setting up procedures, etc. Is a tannery. They tan hides. There is a part of the hide that you actually split off, and that's used in the food industry. So these hides, they come in, and obviously we verify they come from a reputable shlachthuis, from a reputable slaughterhouse.
The Gemara says it's a very honorable job.
And when the Gemara says that Olam mishum nasei bursiki, woes to the one whose job to be a tanner, they knew exactly what they were talking about. It's not a comfortable place to be. But I went in there to check over, to review the procedure, and so it's interesting. We actually soak and salt the hides. I don't know how much you've learned of melicha, the halachas of salting meat, but we soak and salt the hides, and that actually requires hashgachat midis. The way, since we're not planning to sit for hours in the plant, from when the hides come in until when they're sealed away, we actually seal the equipment that the hides are being stored in, and then you come back at the end of whatever part of the process is needed, and we're there until it's sealed again, and eventually it's shipped to wherever it's shipped. We double seal the final product, that part of the hide that's taken off, and it's a chesem b'tei chesem. And but it's just the experience is a fascinating experience of the last place you would expect to soak and salt hides, but there's actually a large demand for it.
What's the hechsher? Could you please explain why is it a hide need a hechsher?
A hide. The practical part. A hide is the skin of the animal. It is meat.
Who's eating the skin of the animal?
The hide is the skin of the animal. That skin is split in half. The bottom part of it is a gelatin-like, is a source from which you can make gelatin-like substances, and it's used in the food industry.
As for gelatin?
Not quite for gelatin. I'm not, I didn't really ask what the application is because it goes more towards.
So is it fleshig?
Is it when it's coming off us? Yeah, it's fleshig. The way it's further processed, I don't know what they do to it further. There's there's a national organization that gives a hechsher on gelatin that comes from beef. I believe it's considered parav because the process changes it so much that it totally lost its original tzura. It's not so. From treif to kosher it wouldn't go, but it lost its identity enough that it loses its fleshig status. This product that we're certifying, I don't know, because what I'm certifying is something really raw. It's coming off. It's being cut off from the hide. It goes through a whole process. You have to soften the hide, and it's not a simple process. It takes a few days, but you cut off the bottom of the hide, the thin, and that's sent to manufacturers that do take further steps. I don't know what they do further to. I just don't know the chemical process, so I don't know what the status would be at the end of the process. On my end, it's something that was just soaked and salted.
But it's used to eat.
It's used. I think
because you wouldn't need a hechsher to make shoes out of it.
No, you don't need a hechsher to make shoes out of it. But it's those shoes can be bought not far from where you live, Rabbi.
Yeah. Now hold on, which leads me to my next thing. Why does Tide need or silver foil pans? Why aluminum foil pans? Why do they sell them with hechsher?
Well, part of it is the value added, but actually, depending on how the process is, I believe.
I'm basically asking, just like
Again, you're asking me about retail products. It's not really my area.
No, I'm asking you. You're dealing with things that we don't think that need hechsherim. Hide. When you're telling me that the hide is somewhere from it is food, I understand why you need a hechsher. But now, you go to the laundry, you'll see that Tide has has hechsherim.
Okay,
well,
silver part
foil
of it.
Pans have hechsherim.
A silver foil pan having a hechsher makes sense.
It's smeared with something.
I am not sure of the. I'm not involved with the process. I don't want to say something I don't know.
What do you guess?
My guess would be that it might be treated with something, but I am not sure.
And why would laundry detergent? Why would palm olive